Okay. I will stick to time firmly, and then we can always continue the conversation over social media or otherwise. So we'll make it work.
And the same here. I will keep mine to my allotted time so that we can hear Ann as well.
Thank you so much. Okay.
Ready? Want me to begin?
Yes, please.
Great, wonderful. Thank you. Well, first of all, I just want to thank you for including me today. It's just such a pleasure to be here this morning with you, and also to share a virtual stage with Ann Hiatt. She's has a remarkable history in leadership development, and I think we're really fortunate to have her with us this morning. And then, of course, participation in events like this demonstrate that you're already taking the right steps to build amazing careers. Ann and I were speaking just a few minutes ago about what a remarkable organizational feat this is to have done. So congratulations already to all of you. I want to share some thoughts that I've developed, and I'll keep this brief so we can have questions and answers and conversation that I've developed about leadership across my career. I think specifically for me, but for many, we end up in positions we may not have envisioned when we were 22 or 25 or even 35. And while my path has been as an academic, I'm a trained historian and a higher education leader, I think and hope that much of this is applicable across fields. I want to speak to you first as students. In addition to being a professor, I was an academic advisor for decades. And I urge you, I know this is going to sound trite, but to follow your passions and worry a little bit less about where they will lead you. And again, this sounds trite, but it's true. You will enjoy greater success if you love or are deeply engaged in what you do. My path to becoming a historian was not linear. I was the first in my family to go away to college, and my family had high expectations that I would be the first doctor in the family. And when they thought doctor, they thought MD. They didn't think PhD. And so I pursued biology for probably my first 2 years in college and hated every moment of it. I wasn't good at it. It didn't speak to me, but I felt I had to take a particular path, and eventually found my way to American Studies and then ultimately to a PhD in history. So my family got their doctor, just not the path any of us envisioned. And the path I got to was the path that I was the most engaged in. My path to leadership, ending up as the first female president of San Francisco State, was from a combination of things. Strong academic preparation. I have an undergraduate degree in American Studies from Stanford and a PhD in US history from Rutgers. And from being willing to take risks and learn new things. So I took jobs that I think some people thought I was slightly crazy to accept. I have done, in addition to being a professor, part-time professor and a full-time professor, I have worked in admissions. I have worked in continuing education. I have overseen auxiliary services. I have worked in academic affairs and student affairs, and I have said yes to pretty much every opportunity that presented itself to me that aligned with my North Star. And I identified my North Star early in my career. I was trained as a professional historian, so I was going to teach history and research history and write history. And fairly early on in my career, I discovered a passion for a more holistic approach to student success. I became devoted to removing barriers to graduation. Universities are full of fabulous professors and really amazing students, but historically, we have not graduated as many of them as we should. And so increasing graduation rates, making sure that more of the students at my universities attained their degrees became my North Star. So I took all sorts of interesting positions along the way that aligned with that North Star. Maybe not with the perfect career trajectory. It wasn't linear. It was, I followed that. I followed my values, and my values were what could I do at any given moment to help students graduate. I started as a part-time faculty member, then an academic advisor and a part-time faculty member, eventually became a full-time faculty member and directed a degree completion program for students who had stopped out and now were coming back as adults. I ran an advising center. I was a vice president for student affairs. And this all led me from the State University of New York, where I was for the first 14 years of my career, to Cal State Long Beach. There is no university system in the country that does better job at scale of helping first-generation students, low-income students, students from every demographic background imaginable attain their academic dreams. And so I was lucky enough to end up at Cal State Long Beach, where I was an associate vice president for undergraduate studies. And my primary objective there was removing barriers to graduation for students. And at the time I thought, oh, I don't want to be a provost. This is the role I like. I like being on the operational side of things. But I was really quite fortunate to work at Cal State Long Beach at a time when the president and the vice presidents and the associate vice presidents and the deans and the faculty and staff were all aligned to support students. And I saw what leadership did. I saw what the president and the vice presidents accomplished, aligning their team, building their team, and aligning us to a common goal. And so I became provost at Cal State LA, and that led me here as president to San Francisco State. Along the route, I just want to share about 5 or 6 of the things that I think I developed, I learned, mentors taught me, I observed, that I've pulled together, and as many other people have done, to be successful. And the first is you leave your ego at the door. It's not about you, it's not about me, it's about the goal, the common goal you're working on. And I think for again, in my field, it's student success, but it could be a myriad number of goals. And then the importance of teams. As a historian, I actually worked alone. And one of the things I always admire about computer science students is you learn how to work in groups. And today's SF Hacks is a classic example of that, but in my field, we didn't. And so I had to learn the importance of teams, identify the right people, the best people for the particular job, and then how do you get to where you need to go together? You're not going to get there alone. You're not going to get there alone. You're not even going to get there with a small group. Instilling agency in people. As a US historian, I studied in particular how women, how the working class, how people of color demanded rights, particularly in the 19th century. That was my field. And it was through their self-agency that women got the vote, and that the early civil rights movement, abolitionism, started. And I think that's true in our everyday lives. We talk about empowering people, but I don't think it's the right word. What you really want to do is instill agency in the people you work with so that they have the power to accomplish what needs to get done. Openness, especially in an academic setting, transparency. I think that virtually everything I do is teaching. Even if I'm not in the classroom teaching history anymore, it's about making sure that the people you're working with have all the tools, have all the knowledge, and that you share that as broadly as you can to, again, accomplish your goals. And flexibility. There are many, many routes to accomplishing something, and you have to be open to them all. And you have to be ready. It's a slightly overused word these days, but you have to be ready to pivot. You have to be flexible. And then a persistent bent toward action. Too often, especially in higher education, we can talk things to death. And so you have to combine all of that with a propensity to action. What's the goal? How are you going to get there? And finally, I heard this once by an educational consulting firm out of Washington, D.C., and I have borrowed it regularly. Run toward criticism. Run toward it. The more you embrace those that are sharing their criticism of you, of your project, of your industry, whatever it is, the more you improve. Embrace continuous improvement. Run toward criticism and embrace continuous improvement. The previous year, the last 12 months, we're about to commemorate our 1-year anniversary of remote learning and working, has affirmed all of this. There is no way that any single person or even a small group could have navigated what we have accomplished the last year. The university and so many other industries have been tested in ways that none of us ever imagined. If even just 12 and a half months ago, someone had told me that we would spend over a year and a half remote and that we would be successful at it, I would have thought they had lost their mind. But again, we showed openness, we showed flexibility. I have a spectacular team of people around me, and we aligned around the goal of making sure that students' degrees and their progress towards those degrees weren't disrupted. And we have been largely successful. I know how hard this has been, and students are struggling working and learning from home, and staff and faculty are, but we've kept it going. And I've now come to the conclusion that if we could do this, there's just about anything we can do. So with that, again, I'm just so grateful to be here, and I'd love to open this up for conversation and questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mahoney. That was great and honestly really inspirational to see a woman in such a high role. So yes, let's open it up to some questions or even just some comments. It looks like we have quite a few people in here. So does anybody have any questions for Dr. Mahoney? If not, that's okay too.
Well, Alicia, can I just build on something you said? You mentioned, and I mentioned it in my introduction about being the first female president of San Francisco State. And first of all, I was shocked actually that San Francisco State hadn't had a female president before. It's such a progressive city. The CSU is so progressive, and to take 120 years to get your first permanent female president seems like a long time. But I was struck by two things. The first is that how important it seemed to be to students and faculty and staff on campus. Students in particular would stop me across campus to talk to me, particularly female students and non-binary students. And the other thing I think I've learned just about the time I took this position, there was an article in the Chronicle on how female leaders, and in this case, they were talking about university presidents, tend to lead differently than men. And again, this is an overgeneralization. And so there are plenty of men who are going to sound like I described, and there are some women who aren't like I described, but they tend to be more democratic, less hierarchical, more open to owning mistakes and learning from mistakes and doing that in a little bit more transparent a way. And so I think some of what I described is my leadership principles, I think also are driven by my experience of having been a woman. And of coming up the ranks that way.
Most definitely. As the president of this organization, it's a big learning experience. So it really is inspirational to see a woman like you in your spot. I actually have a question, if that's okay with everyone else. What does your day-to-day look like? I feel like a lot of people higher up, we don't really know what they do day-to-day. So I'm just curious, like as a president of the university I go to, what does it look like?
So there's pre-pandemic and then there's pandemic life. So pre-pandemic, again, my primary job as a university president is to ensure institutional excellence, that students achieve their degrees, that we have the best faculty and staff, and to kind of help us work together, create a compass for forward movement. So my pre-pandemic world was a combination of meetings and then lots of events. And the event part, meetings are good, you get work done, but the event part was the fun part, going to events like this in person, going to faculty events, just walking around campus and talking to students, meeting with friends of the university, going to events across the city to help develop partnerships and relationships for the city. So it's a very people-intensive job. I was with people from 9 o'clock in the morning till 9 o'clock at night, and often 6 days a week. So it was deeply engaged, lots of people. And then on a dime, on about March 16th, when the mayor put us in shelter in place, poof, all of a sudden it was 4 walls in my home. And so now it is just one Zoom meeting after the other. And but it's very people driven. And one of the things, my husband actually was just talking about this the other day to me. I'm a high extrovert. I thrive on contact with people, and Zoom is, it's good, but it's not great for that. So I really am looking forward to getting back together. So at my position as a president, it's really about meeting people, listening to people, learning about what they need from the institution, building connections to the institution and to the community. So it's mostly meetings and people, and now Zoom.
Yeah, I can totally see why the 4 walls in your home is hard to live with. I think we're all going through the same thing. Oh, someone in the chat said you're so inspiring.
Well, I return the compliment because I was so impressed when I had my planning meeting, Leisha, with you and your team, at how female driven this is. And, in the tech world, that's the future. So, and female and also multiple ethnicities and races. This is a really remarkable group of people. So I return the inspiration to all of you.
Thank you so much. Yes, I am extremely proud of the team that we have. They're honestly the most amazing people. But actually, I have one more question, just because I'm very curious. Throughout your education, whether that be your PhD or your bachelor's, what courses in college have prepared you the most for what you're doing now? And like, what should we keep an eye out for as SCS students?
That's an excellent question. I loved my American Studies degree. I took it mostly, predominantly US history and literature, a little political science. It was interdisciplinary. And I loved it. And I had a professor in particular, Joe Korn, who was the director of the program, who was the first person in college who made me think maybe I could get a PhD one day. So my coursework was in history was really important because it taught me about how ordinary people can change the world. When you read about the movements that followed the American Revolution that extended across the 19th century, workers demanding an 8-hour day and safe working conditions, women demanding the vote, Blacks demanding an end to slavery and then to equal rights. These were ordinary people. So my history coursework really taught me that ordinary people can change the world. And that's a big part of how I think about my job and my life. But I'm going to tell you about the job that I think helped me the most, or the thing that helped me the most. It was my part-time jobs. Like many of you, I had to work during college, and I don't know why, other than I like food. I gravitated to food service, working first in the dining halls at my college, and then working in cafes in the town where my school was in Palo Alto. I was a weekend manager of a cafe. And then after college, I managed a restaurant for a year. And I learned as much from my part-time job. At the time, it was hard, like many of you. It was just hard to juggle work and school. And then I had friends who didn't have to work, and I saw the kinds of internships they got to do or the clubs they joined. But in retrospect, the best thing that happened to me was that I worked through college. So I urge you to think about it holistically. What you're learning in classes is really important, particularly things like coding if you want to be a software engineer. But it's all the other stuff that I think really helps. Running that restaurant my year after I graduated from college, I learned so much about managing people, about building teams. I think about it all the time, that may have actually been the place I learned the most. So it's holistic, put it all together.
That's very encouraging, just because I feel like a lot of people my age will work these side jobs, whether it be like a waiter or whatever, and then they won't think that the skills that they're learning in this specific job are helping them at all or in any way, except for bringing in money. So it's nice to hear that even though as the president, you still appreciate when you worked in the restaurant business. Does anyone else?
I want to just share a kind of interesting story. I think the hardest thing that most people experience in their career is getting your teams to work well together. You know, there's a squeaky wheel, or I'm seeing some nodding faces there. I mean, you've already experienced this when you work in groups, right? And my very first job managing that restaurant, there was a waiter, the head waiter, who was not happy about my arrival. He wanted that position and they hadn't given it to him. And so, for lack of a better term, he hazed me. The first day I came into work, he had refused to throw out all the garbage from over the weekend. So there was big bags of garbage all behind the bar. And, I worked so hard. It would have been easy to demand somebody fire him, but he was a really good waiter. He was a great head waiter. I worked so hard, and within a year, he and I became quite close. Again, because I learned to leave my ego at the door. I did go cry when I saw the garbage behind the bar. I went into the bathroom, cried, and then I came back out and started again. But I learned so much about how do you get people to work with you. And you do it by leaving your ego at home and understanding what drives them. So yeah, no, I really learned a lot that year.
That's such a funny story, actually, that they hazed you in a restaurant. But at least you learned from it, I guess. Are there any other questions? Anyone from SFSU here who kind of came to represent? Besides us, of course. If not, I think I'm going to ask one more thing, and then we can move on to Ann's speech. But for now, Dr. Mahoney, what would you say to a student who is feeling disencouraged to pursue their education in an online pandemic, or their first generation student who feels like it's too late for them to come back? What would you say to them?
Call me, email me, let's talk. It is not too late. The CSU is, again, I think the most remarkable university system in the United States, maybe even the world, in terms of providing access. So it's never too late to start. It's never too late to come back. And I think if the pandemic has taught us anything, it's that the value of there's a lot of buzz out there. Is a college degree really worth it? When you look at the people who have suffered economically over the last 13 months, people with college degrees have fared much better. I think it's something like 80% of professionals have been able to work from home, which means they're suffering less disease, and they've suffered less unemployment. So I think there has never been a better time or a more important reminder. Stay in school. I know it's really hard, and that's why I urge you to ask for help. Ashika, my email is Lynn Mahoney, all one word, at sfsu.edu. I'll pop that in the chat after I'm done. And oh, thank you. Thank you, Lisa. It's hard. Reach out for help. There are people here and at any university you attend who are ready to help you. But the best thing you can do for yourselves, your family, and your future is stick it out, even though I know this is really hard. And the good news is, beginning in fall, we'll be back together, more together, and in spring, we'll probably all be back together. So hang in there.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Mahoney, for coming here today and speaking to us. It's honestly, that was really inspirational.
I would actually want to ask one question, if that's okay. I just thought of one and I really want to ask it.
Let's hear it.
So from when I was in high school and pretty much throughout my pre-college career, everyone would always tell me go to UCs, don't go to CSUs because they're a step level down. What would you say to those people now? Because from attending and having attended SFSU, I can say that there's no difference. For one, a school is a school, and it is what you make it. You make the friends, you make the amazing people, this amazing team that I found. I'm so happy to have met them. So what would you say to someone who is who's been fed sort of these lies, that UCs are better, go to UCs and don't go to CSUs?
I think Kevin, you said it perfectly. College is what you make of it, is the first thing. There are plenty of people coasting through a UC degree who are not getting the experiences you're getting. So first and foremost, and this, by the way, is true of everything you ever do in life. You get what you put in. So I would say this: we are a status-oriented culture, and that's unfortunate. That is unfortunate, because status does not convey value. It just conveys status. So I would say, look at the colleges you want to go to closely. Don't judge a book by its cover or its reputation. I have one child who is a UC graduate. She never took a class in her major that had less than 200 people in it. And I'm not dissing her degree. She chose the school that was right for her and she enjoyed it. We don't do that in the CSU. We have smaller classes and you get much more contact with your faculty. So look for value, look for the experience, and move beyond status. Yeah, yeah, they should. And I think Manu asked a question. Hi, Manu, it's nice to see you. Interdisciplinary is where it's at, right? And I'm sure Ann will talk to this. Our lives are not just one thing. And so I think the more that we break down boundaries between traditional disciplines and traditional skill sets, the better we are, the better our students will be for it. And that's the kind of thing that makes the CSU and San Francisco State so exciting.
I completely agree. And Professor Kumar is actually working on a great program to connect business with computer science. So I'm really excited for that as well. Thank you so much, Dr. Mahoney, again, for coming, and we can hand the mic off to Ann Hiatt for now. But Dr. Mahoney, thank you so much again.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I really feel like I could just end there. Dr. Mahoney's comments are exactly on track with what I'm about to say. My experience is slightly different. I come at you from a tech angle, but education has been a huge part in queuing up the most rewarding parts of my life, for sure. So if you don't mind, I'm going to, since 20 minutes is a very short amount of time. I've actually prepared on my website a handout, a worksheet of what I'm about to talk about, because there's some actionable steps that you can take to apply this into your education and as you're jumpstarting your careers. So if you go to annhiatt.co and just look for future-proof career, you can just download the worksheet there. So don't feel like you have to take notes. I know it's still early in the morning in California. It's 5 p.m. here, so I've got a jump start on you, at least with caffeine. So I'm going to share my screen. I've got just a couple of slides to kind of outline what I'm about to share with you. Might help you follow along a bit. Hopefully you can see that. So what I'm going to talk to you today is about future-proofing your career. Now, I know you're just getting started. Some of you are working, some of you are full-time students, some of you are doing both. I definitely did both. I went to the University of Washington for my undergraduate degree. And while I was at UW, I worked 2 student jobs to pay for my education. I worked at Suzzallo Library, and I also worked at the European Union Center. I worked there. I graduated from my undergrad in 2002. So that was immediately after the dot-com bust. And the economy in the city of Seattle was nearly destroyed by that event. So I graduated into an environment that's probably not unlike what's about to happen this year or the next year, where there weren't as many opportunities as you might hope. And a lot of my classmates had very limited or no offers after they graduated. But I can tell you, I just literally this morning read a study saying that the resilience that comes out of those entrepreneurs who graduate in these times of crisis far makes up for the challenges you're facing right now. So let that be a little silver lining for you. So for me, future-proofing your career is more about removing mental barriers. I'm not about to give you a speech about focusing on STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, or how to compete with robots in the future. In my experience, that doesn't matter. The thing that you can do now to best future-proof your career is to find what makes you happy. And this, again, is exactly what Dr. Mahoney was just talking about. Find your passions, find what you want to put into the world, and look for opportunities to really be challenged at that level. So this is where we're going to start the talk. So I want to use this analogy. In this photo, this is Roger Bannister, and he ran a race in 1954 that continues to live in history. This was the first time in the history of foot races, since we've been measuring them from the beginning of time, that a human ran a mile in less than 4 minutes. Until this day in 1954, everyone assumed that that was impossible. So this race is now known as the Miracle Mile. And then what was amazing about this is no one in the history of time had ever run it faster than 4 minutes. And 2 months later, Roger Bannister again, and a fellow racer, John Landy, broke it again. And then since then, more than 1,400 male athletes have broken this record. And now this speed, which used to be considered impossible, is the standard pace for middle distance runners, professional runners. And I think that's really analogous for what we do in our academic aspirations and also our professional aspirations. Sometimes we can put up a barrier in our mind of something we think is impossible, but really it's all in our heads. If we focus and we work hard, or if we remove that burden of perfection, we can actually do things that are exceptional. So my career started very unexpectedly in technology. I'm actually first generation non-farmer in my entire family. My dad and my mom met when my dad was working on my mother's family potato farm in Idaho. And my dad had seen the very, very hard life it was to be a farmer. And so he decided he wanted a new challenge for himself. So he decided he wanted to be a pilot. And not only any pilot, but he wanted to be a jet pilot, a fighter pilot. And so he took a big bet on himself, and he left everything that he had ever known. And he applied to the Air Force Academy, finished pilot training, and became the less than 1% of those graduates to not only not wash out, but to be chosen as a fighter pilot. And he flew F-4 Phantom jets when I was young. I was actually born on an Air Force base in Tampa, Florida, which is how I got my start. The first 10 years of my life, we were all over the world. And then my dad decided to go to law school, and he clerked for a judge and then started working for a firm in Seattle. Now, because my parents are from a farming background, they didn't want to live in the big city. So they actually decided that they were going to move to a smaller town called Redmond, Washington, which you might have heard of because that is the home of Microsoft. So my parents actually chose our home because our neighbors had horses and it was on a huge plot and we had a big garden in the back, which made my mom really happy. But they did not realize that just literally less than 5 minutes from our front door was about to happen the personal computing revolution. So Microsoft is, my parents still live in that house today. I go back to Redmond all the time because all of my siblings live there except for one in DC. And I was surrounded by the tech revolution. So when I was graduating from UW in 2002, the director of the European Union Center, where I was working on campus, asked me what I was going to do when I graduated. And I had sent out so many resumes and had heard nothing back. Not even a phone interview, not even acknowledgement, nothing. I didn't over-personalize that because all my friends were in the same boat, but he encouraged me to apply at Amazon because his wife was working in recruiting there. And that is literally, I promise you, the only reason I thought to put my resume on there. I had not planned a career in technology. My plan was to get a PhD and be like Dr. Mahoney and spend my career in academics. So I went to that Amazon interview kind of not knowing if I was going to enjoy that environment. I knew I wanted to have a few years of working experience in between graduating from undergrad and starting my PhD. And it's a long story, but I got hired at Amazon to be a junior assistant working directly for Jeff Bezos in 2002, 2003, and 2004 through 2005. So I don't know if you can appreciate the fact that the internet was a brand new thing. Nobody knew what it was. We didn't know if this was the next big thing. Nobody really knew what Amazon was. I have to admit, when I went in for that first interview, I had not yet even created an Amazon account, which I'm sure for you all sounds insane, but it was a brand new technology and not many people had adopted it yet. And I, in that first job, got to watch Jeff Bezos invent the gold standard of e-commerce. That is a moment in time that will never happen again. We will never have the invention of the internet again or the invention of e-commerce again. And I learned a lifetime worth of business lessons in those 3.5 years that I worked for Jeff Bezos. Then I went to California, got into my dream PhD program at Berkeley. And a year or so after I started my PhD, I got recruited by Google. And I first worked for Marissa Meyer, who was at the time a Vice President over Search Products and User Experience. Learned so much from her about everything: launch events, war rooms, crisis, code reds, managing large teams moving really, really fast. And then I got recruited to go into the CEO's office. And the last 9.5 of the 12 years that I worked at Google, I worked directly for Eric Schmidt. The first 3 years while he was still CEO and the last as chairman. And then as I said, I worked there for 12 years, and there came a time in my life where I decided I needed a new challenge. So I left Google, this is recently 2 years ago now, and I decided to start my own consulting firm. And it was then I had just started my firm like 1.5 years before this whole global pandemic had started. And I found myself in 2020 handling, I now consult for CEOs all over the world on 4 different continents of completely different industries. And I found myself in 2020 consulting my global clients who were all in a moment of crisis and pivot at the exact same time. And the funny thing was, I'd actually flown from Spain to Texas. I was going to speak at South by Southwest. This is almost to the day 1 year ago that I left Spain. Like I think Monday is the anniversary of that flight. So I got to Texas, and by then they'd canceled the conference. And Spain then a few days later closed the border, so I couldn't come back home. So I thought, okay, we'll just make the best of a crazy situation. So I flew up to Seattle and spent the next 9 weeks with my parents, which was actually an incredible silver lining that I'm so, so glad I got, because I could protect them. I did all their shopping and kept them locked at home. And then I just tried to handle my clients as best I could while there. And I did all of those calls, like board meetings and emergency meetings about layoffs and furloughs from the bedroom that I had in high school, which was kind of funny. So what I want to talk to you about, illustrate, so that's my background. But today I want to present to you a concept that I think of as a personalized ROI. Now, ROI usually refers to return on investment. And that applies to what I'm about to say as well. But here I'm repurposing this to mean recognize, own, and implement. And this is a strategy that helped me a lot to make the most of my university experience, and also especially in the early stages of my career. But honestly, this is something I continue to do today. This pattern remains applicable for sure. So recognize is where that means to me, we're having a conversation with ourselves and establishing where you want to go in your career and who you want to go with. And this is what Dr. Mahoney was calling your North Star. Many people skip this step. And let me tell you, those who end up pivoting or confused or in careers that don't satisfy them haven't taken this first step of asking themselves this very foundational question. The O is for own. This is about reinvesting in yourself, your skills and your knowledge, your network, and pivoting. This is not something you do once early in your career and you're done with it. This is something you're going to do consistently across your career. What I just described as my, my work history, that was me owning it. Each of those decisions was very, very purposeful, and it would have been really hard for me to know what I wanted to do next had I not taken the time to establish what I wanted to own. What did I want to learn? What networks did I want to be in? And what should my next pivot look like? And the last element of your ROI is implement. And for me, implement means regularly creating an action plan for yourself, being very purposeful. As we were talking about in the questions with Dr. Mahoney, there's your university experience is definitely what you make of it. Your first roles after university are entirely up to you. It could be just feeling hazed by taking out mountains of garbage, or you can do what Dr. Mahoney did and really prove yourself to them, double down on it. Like say, I'm going to be the best teammate you ever had, and you're going to remember my name like 10 years from now. And those early stages of your career really make a huge difference. My very first real job, other than after babysitting, which I did a lot when I was young, but my very first job when I was 16 was working for a startup. This is long before anyone even knew what a startup was. That was not a thing. But I worked for a very tiny, tiny company called Musicware in downtown Redmond, started by two brothers who had just graduated from Harvard Business School. And they started a company that was a music transcription company, which is actually very impressive for, I think that was 1995. So in 1995, they had this where you could play a composition into a keyboard, and there's computer software would transcribe it for you into sheet music. And then they also then iterated into piano lessons where you could do some exercises, and the software would then report back to you and recommend ways that you can improve. Super impressive for 1995. That was my first job. Now, because it was a job that had 5 total employees, it was really up to me to just figure things out myself. There was no one there to train me or teach me how to do things right. I really had to do that for myself. And so that was a good example of implementing. I wanted to create an action plan for myself so that it didn't just feel like making copies and answering the phones and assembling packets, but I really felt a part of the core part of that company. In fact, one of my embarrassing good stories from that very first job was one day I'd been tasked to assemble marketing packets for 100 interested potential buyers of the software. And I, at this point, was far more interested in like the business strategy and eavesdropping on the conversations of the founder brothers. I was really fascinated about how they were like getting this startup off the ground. I was not that interested in making hundreds of copies and assembling like packets. That to me felt meaningless and mindless. And so I didn't really pay attention as I should have when the copy machine started acting up and it started producing those blurry ones, you know, when the toner's down and you get that like weird stripe down the side. So I produced like hundreds of packets. And then at the end of the day, the CEO had to come to me and tell me to throw them out and start again, because we couldn't send that out. That didn't represent our company or our product in a professional way. And I was super embarrassed. I realized that I had wasted company resources and time, and I hadn't really thought about the task that I'd been given. I hadn't thought about, what does this mean? Who's going to receive it? What is going to happen when they receive this packet? And if I had thought about it for just a second, I'd really implemented a strategy and an action plan, I would have realized that that was probably the most important thing happening at the company that day. Potentially converting 100 new sales was a huge opportunity to impact our bottom line. But instead I wasted resources and had to start again. And I will tell you now that I never made that mistake again. So from then on, I constantly was thinking about the larger impact of the seemingly small tasks that I had been given, and committed myself to never making that mistake again. So let's dig into each of these three just a little bit more. So our first step is recognize in our ROI. And this again is about defining success for ourselves. So this is where we want to create a personal vision and mission plan. And this is, a lot of business books are written about this, but it really comes down to very simple questions. Who do you want to serve? What do you want to serve them? And why is that important to you? That is your guide. That's all you need to do. This is how you create your own North Star. So first, who do you want to serve? Who are the people that might be inspired by your journey? Who do you want to surround yourself with? What networks do you want to be doing? Second, what do you want to put into the world? What is aligned with your passions and your values? What changes do you think you can implement? And third, why is that important to you? And why is it important to those who are going to receive it? Now, the early stages of your career, it's okay if this part is not clear. The most important part for you at this moment is to be consistently asking yourself these questions and surrounding yourself with other people who are doing the same, which obviously, because you're dedicated enough to be up at this hour on a Saturday, you're clearly these kind of people. So I think this will come very naturally to you. You're probably already doing this yourself. So the second step here is a challenge that I want to give you. And I want you to think about making a really big bet on yourself. When Jeff Bezos was thinking about leaving his very, very lucrative job at D.E. Shaw in New York, he was the youngest vice president they had ever promoted. He was their highest performer. He was being very, very well compensated. And still, he had this feeling about this thing called the internet that he just knew he had to take a risk on it. He knew that he would be upset with himself if he didn't go after that. So I want to go down to this next slide before I'm going to pop back up in a sec. But this is a beautiful quote, I think, from Jeff, who I heard him say this when I was in his office, like probably 1 million times. He shared this story all the time. And if you want to hear more or even hear the recording of this, just Google Jeff Bezos regret minimization and you'll get it. But what he said was, I knew that when I was 80, I was not going to regret having tried this. I was not going to regret trying to participate in this thing called the internet that I thought was going to be a really big deal. I knew that if I failed, I wouldn't regret that. But I knew the one thing I might regret is not having ever tried. And let me tell you right now, it is statistically proven that we regret less our mistakes than not trying at all. It's just universal truth. This is not special to Jeff and the amazing celebrity CEO persona that you know him as now. I saw him in the early nerd version of that. This is not special or unique to him. He is a special, unique person, but this principle is universally acceptable. So I really want you, as you're thinking about this, about recognizing what's of value to you, take some risk, especially now, especially early. This is the time. It will never get easier than now to make a really big bet on yourself. So I know that your path forward might not feel clear at the moment. So that's why I want to challenge you to do something I call a dream resume. Now, a dream resume has nothing to do with the fancy corporate titles in my resume right now, or any of the job titles that you might want in the future. In my experience, there is no correlation between those titles and those fancy sounding company names and happiness. What you want in your dream resume is you want to think about what in your future, 20 years from now, what do you want to have accomplished? What are the experiences you want to have had? Who are your avatar mentors? Now, avatar mentors to me mean people who are 20 years ahead, the person you want to be in the future. For example, I love Brene Brown. I know that I have not gone back to my PhD, so I will never be fully Brene Brown. But if I was looking at her to create my dream resume, I'd think, well, gosh, do you know that her first book she had to self-publish because publishers thought no one would buy a very depressing book about shame. So she took a risk on herself. She made a big bet and she wrote a book. And then she got on different stages. Then she did a TED Talk, which then blew up. Then she leaned into that. She's pivoted into this incredible woman that she is now. So think about somebody who's doing those accomplishments and having those experiences you hope to have, and then research them, read their books, read their work, listen to their talks, and kind of reverse engineer their career steps. And then start today to inch your way towards that. Now, the other side of that, from these avatar avatar mentors are those who can be a mentor to you now. This is somebody who's like literally only 1 or 2 steps ahead of you on your journey. And those are the people who will help you in these small pivots or make sure you're asking yourself the right questions or giving you the kind of that daily advice. So in that, we're going to look for some common traits. When we're thinking about regret minimization for you, we're going to look for opportunities for you to reinvest in yourself, your education, your training, constantly up-leveling. Second is look for opportunities for innovation or grit. This might be an opportunity to take a risk, to take on a leadership role before you feel fully like prepared to do so, or be engaged with really hardworking people who are going to give you a good model for this early in your experience in the work field. And the last is really look for industries or companies or groups of people where you see a lack of complacency. Satya Nadella, the new CEO, well, it's not super new now, but to me, I grew up with Bill Gates, but he's the new CEO of Microsoft. And he said his biggest secret sauce in turning around the culture of Microsoft was he shifted it from a culture of know-it-alls to learn-it-alls. You want to be with the learn-it-alls. You want to be with the people who are curious and asking the big questions and leaning into things they don't understand. 1, they're way more fun to be with, and 2, they'll inspire you and allow you to do the same. So now we're going to move on to owning it. This part gets really fun. So you've already established what you want to accomplish and you're working the steps to get there. So first is knowing when to take risks. Now, as I mentioned, I worked for Eric Schmidt, the CEO of Google, for 9.5 of the 12 years I worked at Google. And he did a really scary thing, which ended up being a great career model for me. He transitioned from being CEO to executive chairman. And when he did that, he left a known role, which was CEO, and he was amazing at it. He honestly is the reason that Google is as dominant as it is today. But he decided to become chairman, and he'd never been a chairman before, and Google had never even had one before. So we really had to invent what that role was going to look like, and he really 10x'd his output. And then I later followed his example when I left Google and I bet on myself, moved to Spain, started a company, not knowing it was immediately before a pandemic, but I had that example ahead of me to look to. Second is setting some expectations for yourself. This is about teaching people how to treat you and think about you, especially early in your career. So you're going to disrupt some status quos. You're going to suggest some ways of doing things that maybe no one has ever done it before, but you've got this novice advantage. You're not burdened with the way that things have always been done in the past, and that can be the best thing that ever happens to a team. So seek out teams that are going to see that as an asset. And the last step of owning it is getting comfortable being uncomfortable. Because if you're doing things you've never done before and volunteering for things that are going to challenge you, you're not going to be perfect. And seek out environments where that is encouraged. Consistently remind yourself about that 4-minute mile barrier and ask yourself if you're just mentally limiting yourself from a task. In fact, a funny example of this is if you've seen The Princess Bride. You remember when Princess Buttercup and Wesley are approaching the fire swamp as they're being chased by the evil prince. And Buttercup pauses before entering into the fire swamp and she says, "We'll never survive." And Wesley responds very calmly, "Nonsense. You're only saying that because no one ever has." You're going to have a career moment that feels like that, where you're like, I do not see a way out of this. This is horrible. Like, for example, when I was in my early years of Amazon, when we were not sure if we were going to survive that .com bust, it was not clear sailing for us, for sure. It was a fight every single day. And we were putting a lot of energy into something we weren't honestly sure if it was going to work. But I promise you, if you spend your time outside of your comfort zone, you surround yourself with people who are really going to push you. If you set goals for yourself that are a big challenge, you can get over that mental barrier. So the last one is implement. And implement gets really fun. And this is the rinse and repeat part of your career. Implementing is about an endless cycle of putting in the work and pivoting. You're going to conjure up serendipity. What does that mean? That means you know in your mind's eye where you're going and where you want to be and who you want to go with. And so when those glimmers of opportunity come up, you will recognize them before anyone else around you. You will see them as irreplicable opportunities that you just want to jump on board and take advantage of. Then you want to just get in that room and build that network and eventually get a seat at the table. First, just get in the room. That was the secret to my success. Just get in the room with the smart people, and then you learn to earn a place at the table. And in my experience, no one has ever given me a seat at the table. I had to just drag my own chair in from the other room once I had qualified myself to sit at that table. Second part is not get complacent. There's going to be a part in your career years down the road where it just gets very routine and you know what you're doing, you know all the answers, and that is the most important moment to get outside that comfort box and make sure you're not spending more than 80% of your time in your comfort zone, that you're constantly challenging yourself. And find a good mentor. There's a reason why Olympic athletes, who are literally the best in the world, have coaches, because these people keep you honest, keep you pushing outside your comfort zone, even when your lungs are burning and you're terrified. They keep you going. So it's really most of this journey is about who you spend your time with. Last thing I'm going to leave you with is, look, there's more than 7 billion people on this planet. I think it's 7.7 billion people right now. So if there's a 1 in a million chance that you're going to be successful at a risk you want to take it. More than 7,000 people in the world are going to win that. So why not you? Really make a big bet. There's no harm in trying some hard things and failing. Trust me, Jeff Bezos's regret minimization principle is really, really true. So I know that went really fast. I hope you download the worksheet from my website. It's free, about all kinds of free resources there. And please continue to connect with me. I'd love to take some questions now, but you can also reach out to me on social media. On Instagram, I'm Ann Hiatt, and Twitter, I'm Ann R. Hiatt. So I would love to continue the conversation now for whatever questions we can't get to. But for now, let's get into some live questions.
There were 3 questions in the chat, all from Ashika, and we just got one more. So I think reading the chat would be, and another one. So
let's do it. Okay, I'm just reading them now. So how do you know when it's the right time to take a risk? I think it goes down to that North Star of yours. For me, it's 3 things. You look for, is this an irreplicable opportunity, like the dawn of the internet or sitting next to Jeff Bezos every day? Obviously, you're going to say yes to that. The tricky part is identifying that really, really early before anyone else knows it. Second is, are you working for a leader that you want to become like? That alone has changed my life. Even if I hadn't have entered the workforce at the dawn of the internet, the thing that changed my life the most was working for leaders like whom I wanted to become. So look for those leaders that you want to follow. And let's see, third, I would be like, if you're going to be pushed outside of your comfort zone, if in that role or whatever this goal is you've set for yourself, you're going to continue to learn and constantly be uncomfortable, that's when I would always say yes. It's also about learning what voices to listen to. You're going to get conflicting advice for sure. Like when I was considering leaving my PhD, my dad to this day thinks that was a mistake. Even though really great things happened afterwards, he still asks me when I'm going back to become a doctor. But you're going to learn what voices to listen to and to really, most importantly, like follow that internal North Star. Can I please discuss a negative working experience and how I overcame it? This is a great question. Yes, definitely. Even though I work for the best bosses in the entire world and for incredible companies, I absolutely had some challenges. The first one that comes to mind is when I was working with a very toxic teammate. So I had been recruited into a team to take on a particular project, and someone on that team found that very threatening. She thought that she had, because she had longevity in that team, that she was going to be given that opportunity, and she saw it as a slight that they recruited me from outside the team to come and lead that. And so she made my life miserable. She was hostile. She embarrassed me in front of our peers. She disrespected me in front of our executive. She would literally go in and delete my work or make changes to make me look bad. Now, this is a rare occurrence, but I really thought I was going crazy. And it was just maybe 4 years ago, she actually called me to apologize and to say that I wasn't crazy, and she really did do that. But I mean, it wasn't about me. It was about her feeling really disappointed that she hadn't have earned that opportunity. And so I overcame that by just trying to build up what I call friendship currency with her. So I wanted to spend some calm hours every morning going through just learning about her and her life and her goals so that we would have this kind of understanding of each other. I tried to collaborate on a project where we ended up hosting office hours every morning together, answering questions from our global team so that we could have this like common win. It did get better, but honestly, it wasn't my problem to solve, unfortunately. So I wouldn't say it was ever perfect. And eventually she just moved on to another team. But I learned not to be gaslit. really, to like trust my own voice and know that I was being a good leader, and it was okay if I couldn't fix that problem that didn't have anything to do with me. How and where do you find a mentor? So I'm going to tell you a secret right now. Most of my mentors don't know I exist. And that's because they're just like Brene Brown. Like, I've never talked to Brene Brown, but I want to. But I actively follow her. I've read all of her books. I love her social media. I love her podcasts. And so seek out people who are very aspirational. Now for that mentor who's just 1 or 2 steps ahead of you, I seek them out in the teams I'm on. Right now it's really hard for me because I founded my own business. So the people I'm talking to all the time are my clients. My clients are not going to become my mentors. So now I've joined, because of the pandemic and I'm in a foreign country, I've actually joined some online networking groups. The one I love the most right now is based in California. It's called Lunch Club. If any of you want an invite, ping me and I'll send you one. It's invite only at the moment, but that's a great way to find peers who are like-minded, so you can talk to them about particular themes or find a co-founder for a startup idea you've got. So seeking out places where like-minded people are hanging out. And the internet has made this so much easier. You're not limited to what's available in your town or your university. Really, the world is your oyster. I can't tell you how much easier it is now with the internet. In the early years, did I see the internet becoming the next big thing? Would you personally make a big bet right now? Oh, where would I personally make a big bet right now? Ooh. Love these questions. Okay. Yes, I knew that the internet was going to be the big thing. I had the advantage of being just young enough to conceive of doing things completely differently than they'd ever been done before. I think if I'd been maybe even 5 years older than that, I might not have jumped in the way I did. But the second I met Jeff Bezos in my interview, I knew. I was 100% sure. It's just something in my gut told me it made sense, and I felt the energy. I just followed that, even though I had no idea what that was going to mean for my life for the next like 15 years. Where I would make a bet right now is on yourself. I would make a bet in doing whatever you uniquely offer. For me, that's sharing this wisdom that's in my head, these lessons learned from the best business minds in the world, and my personal mission. So I talked to you about creating your own mission statement. My mission statement right now is to discover and empower underrepresented entrepreneurs through actionable education and mentorship. So that's where I'm investing right now. What I want is to build a huge community of people where we can support each other, because we're better together than apart. And I actually have a book coming out this year with HarperCollins. It was supposed to be launched this month. Thank you, COVID. Now it's pushed to October, but it's called Bet on Yourself. And it's about these principles that we've talked about today, about really finding that thing that you want to make a big bet on and being unapologetic about it. So lots more coming. Please watch this space. Let's see. Let me back up. Let me go back to the first part of my presentation. Make a bet on what brings you joy. Like, that is a future-proof career. Yes, if you love STEM, if you love data analytics, if you're a creative person, those things that are really hard for AI to do, either find ways to work really closely with AI or do things that AI can't currently do. But more importantly than that is to do something that brings you joy. I have never met a group of more miserable people than people who went to law school because their parents thought they should. Those people are miserable. I say that my dad's a lawyer and both of my brothers are, and they're very happy. So no slight to lawyers, but don't do it for someone else's reasons, which some of you might be experiencing right now. You might feel pressure to go into something that doesn't make your heart sing. That's not going to last.
Right. I wish you could keep going. I know.
And right on time. Dang it. 1 minute over. Sorry about that.
No, you're completely fine. And I wish we could just keep going, because the advice that you're giving us is so crucial and important, especially for where we are in our lives right now. I feel like a lot of people in STEM, especially in CS, feel pressured to do this one thing, to be the next Jeff Bezos. But what you're telling us is honestly so important, and it should be blasted from speakers, So thank you so much, Anne. And for people who still have questions, Anne has her own channel on our Discord. So definitely go and ask Anne all of your questions, in that Discord. And Anne and Dr. Mahoney, thank you guys so much. I have to run to the other workshop right after this. But again, we appreciate you guys so much taking the time out of your day. And I hope we get to work together again.
Me too.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.